Welcome back to another episode of the Kayleigh O'Keefe Show, where today I am so excited to introduce you to Virginia Schmidt. Virginia is a writer, a speaker, a spiritual student teacher, and the founder of Divinity Ranch. Just that term alone, Divinity Ranch, will catch some of your attention as it caught mine. And in this episode, I think you're going to hear two people who are kindred spirits who have been walking similar paths and coming away with some similar takeaways about what it means to open up our hearts. What does it mean to expand? What does it mean to live an authentic life? Virginia and I first crossed paths in the online business space through a mutual coach and connection that you'll hear us talk a lot about in this episode. Shout out to Lee. And in this episode, you're going to hear what it's been like for both of us as we have maybe shed expectations from who we thought we were meant to be based on the external environment into who is it that we are truly becoming. You are going to love to hear Virginia. She speaks so beautifully, straight from the heart, and you will not be able to get enough of Virginia in this episode. So I will invite you to check out her YouTube page at Divinity Ranch, subscribe, and not only will you get her latest videos on all things spirituality and love, you will also be able to follow her as she takes her van across the country and begins to have experiences connecting with, engaging in dialogue, and learning about what it means to be in this thing called life from a spiritual perspective. So she's hitting the road. I think by the time you listen to this, she'll be on the road, and you can catch her at Divinity Ranch on YouTube. All right, without any further ado, enjoy this conversation. And if you do, please subscribe, review, rate the podcast, and would love to bring you more interviews like this one with Virginia. Enjoy. I'm Kayleigh O'Keefe, ex-corporate and tech startup leader turned founder and CEO of Soul Excellence Ventures. And I created this podcast for individuals who don't like to be boxed in, for people who don't like doing what everyone else does, and for leaders like you who set their own high standards of success. On the Kayleigh O'Keefe Show, we'll explore better ideas for living and leading so that you can tune out the negativity and tune into the timeless ideas that pave the way towards self-expression and true freedom. No topic here is off limits. I love business, sports, travel, politics, religion, culture, technology, and big ideas. So we'll use current events to inspire our conversations as we go. Thank you for joining me, and let's dig into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kayleigh O'Keefe Show podcast, where I am so excited to be joined by Virginia Schmidt. She is a writer, a speaker, a spiritual student teacher, and the founder of Divinity Ranch. Virginia, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here with you, Kayleigh. Thank you so much for having me. And hello to everyone out there. I'm so glad that you could be joining us.
It's been just one of the biggest gifts of going down this entrepreneurial path is connecting with and meeting with people from around the world like you who've had an awakening, who are on this path, and like our paths have crossed in so many ways recently. And then I start to realize like we've traveled some similar physical roads too.
Literally.
Camino de Santiago. We've lived with Spanish-speaking homestay families in country. So we've written best-selling books where we've shared our message. Like there's just so much that I want to explore with you. And I just want to really thank you for joining me and express what a gift it is to get to know people like you when we start to put ourselves out there and connect in a new way. So
amen. Like it's kind of amazing how when we start to put out who we, truly are from a soul level into the world, like we start connecting with people that we have that kind of real resonance with. It's like, where were these people before? Oh yeah, I wasn't showing myself in that way.
Oh, it makes me think of a video I just watched of yours on your YouTube channel, the "You Are Not Alone" message, and the thinking that we're having that shared struggle throughout life of where is the depth? Where is the connection? Where can I go to just be myself and not continue to step into that people pleasing or who does everyone else need me to be energy. And I really connected so much with the message that you shared there.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for watching that video. Yeah, exactly. That resonates and reflects what we were just talking about. And it's a big theme and something that I've been thinking about a lot, as far as whether it's people that I'm meeting in person in this, conservative community that I live in, or that I'm living in right now, my hometown of Cody, Wyoming, and meeting other like more open-minded, open-hearted, sort of progressive type people, and them saying, I feel so isolated. I don't meet anyone else like this, or on my YouTube channel or my website, people saying, well, it's so good to hear somebody who, tries to think and live spiritually. Like, I just don't know anyone like that in my community. And I think a question that we just have to start to ask ourselves is like, well, are you putting it out there that's what, like, are you not meeting other progressive minded people or spiritually minded people because you're not showing that you're that kind of person, and you're only interacting with people on the level that you're expressing? Because that's been my experience.
It's so interesting because, your experience in, a smaller town, conservative place sounds quite like my experience in a large progressive place like San Francisco, where there's still, when the conversations are happening at the level of I'm entrenched in an identity and a perspective versus I'm open-minded and want to get to know people at an individual level, it's like we're talking about the same place. Right. Because it's the same mindset.
Yes, because it's not about the specificities. It's like whether you want to call it, a frequency or a level of authenticity. Exactly. It's like the difference between jargon and name dropping and, so whether you're, saying it about the Republican news or the latest liberal Democratic news, it's just like, I want to make sure that when I say these things, that I'm this kind of person. But it's like you walk away from that conversation still, feeling kind of empty because it wasn't from the heart. Like, who is that person?
Oh gosh. Okay. I'm going to make a little footnote to come back to this theme if we have time. So I want you to take us back. You became a best-selling author in a book called Visionary, and you tell the story about, your own rebirth last year in the middle of COVID, living in another country. And I'd love if you could just share a bit more about that experience with my audience.
Totally. So, I'm 31 and I've traveled the world a lot. I lived a year in Australia. I've lived in Mombasa, Kenya. I had the privilege in my upbringing as well to travel a lot. And yet I never really had become fluent in another language. And I would always be parts of these like conversations with lots of people who had lived for a year in other countries and could speak other languages. And like, yeah, it's so important to do that. Like, and then I'm like, wait a minute, like I've never done that. And so I decided like, okay, it's time. I'm going to go spend a year in Central and South America, finally become fluent in Spanish, start in Central America and make my way down to South America. So I started in Guatemala, and ended up in Kayleigh, Guatemala. And so that was in late February of 2020. We all know where this story is going. And I ended up at a Spanish speaking language immersion school, which I highly recommend to anyone who would like to learn Spanish. It's called PLQ, Proyecto Lingüístico Quetzaltenango. And it's in Kayleigh, Guatemala. That's Kayleigh with an X. So maybe we can put a link to that or something.
Yeah, would love to. And I'm like, I definitely would not be able to pronounce that last word or the Q word that you.
Yeah. And that's actually another name. So everyone calls the city Kayleigh. Its real name is Quetzaltenango.
Oh, okay. I see why.
So anyway, so I had ended up there, and I had been living with my host family for about 3 weeks, when COVID hit, like really hit, and the US government issued, basically a called for everyone to come home. And it was kind of this panic of like, if you ever want to get back to the United States, you're going to go home now.
Yeah.
And including, there was in the school when I was going there was an LA Times reporter who was another student there who, is supposed to be the correspondent to Central America for the LA Times. And even she's going home and she's telling all the students to go home. And, my parents were telling me to go home. Everything about like my head and my fear and all of these things were telling me like, this is, you've got to do what everyone else is doing. And yet something about my heart and like, I said, and I say this in my chapter in Visionary, I was talking to my then boyfriend at the time, Ollie, who was in Australia. And I was like, if I do what everyone else thinks that I should do, then I definitely need to go home. But if I do what I feel that I'm like destined to do, then I'm going to stay here. And I checked in with my host family, and honestly, like they wanted me to stay because literally all of the other students, which there had been like between 75 and 100 other students, just my school, not to mention all the other extranjeros and Shayla left. Like eventually I was like the only white person like left in this city, which was very interesting. But my family was like, we want you to stay. Like this, so much of the economy of the city was, foreign people studying English.
Yeah.
And these host families like relied on this income. And so my family wanted me to stay. So I did end up staying for another 5 months. So I stayed until August and I lived with my host family. There was a toque de queda, a curfew every night for most of that time from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Was the word toque de guerra?
De queda.
De queda.
Like
makes more sense. I was like, whoa, this just came into like a military term too. Crazy. I was like, what's that?
Yeah. Okay, although it's interesting you say that because for quite a while, it was really weird. Every night when the curfew started, like military trucks would drive around the streets playing the Guatemalan anthem, like both to be checking that people were inside and also for this sense of like patriotic solidarity.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I have some interesting videos of that. So really and then, I continued taking Spanish lessons. I became like best friends with my Spanish teacher who was about my age, Mariela, who would come to my family's house every day. And I helped my family in their panaderia, like a bakery, and literally only spoke Spanish in person. And it was around this time that so this is all really to say, I had a lot of time inside and alone.
Yeah.
And what was I doing during this time? Like reading what I really love to do if I actually have time and don't have so many external inputs, which is like meditating, doing yoga, reading spiritual books, and listening to spiritual discourses. And I've been a journalist, among many other things, but really a journalist and a content curator in many ways for the past decade. And it was suddenly, I was like, it's pretty interesting how I never write about or speak about the things that I like to listen to and read about. And I think probably some people who, I think you can relate to this sort of like afraid to come out of the spiritual closet when you've been very much in that hard news, academia, like, more masculine energy type of expression place. And so it was actually one day when I was meditating, I had this just out of nowhere, just heard that I've really never had another experience like this meditating. It was just like out of the dark, out of the silence, just the phrase YouTube videos. And I was like,
you're like, not something you'd expect a spiritual guy to tell you, but all right, I'm listening.
Exactly. Although that being said, a lot of what I would spend my time doing, we had a terrace, like an open air terrace on the roof. And I really like to walk, as I know you do too, since we've both done some serious trekking. so I would just walk in circles up there, just listening to YouTube audios. And it was like, wow, like I guess I could really do this. But it was around this time that I met, through various connections, became connected with Lee Jane Woodgate.
Yep.
Of the Divine Feminine Leadership Collective. And she has a new school called Anatogy. And it's just one of my dear friends. Like, I love Lee from the bottom of my heart. And so I started working with her as a business coach and using this time to invest in myself. And like, basically I told her, I was like, well, I want to, start talking about spiritual things, but like, first I need to go to school for theology and like, probably like divinity school. And she was just like, no. Like, you're going to start your own divinity school. And so
voice, I hear her voice. I can see her face, like just dropping that truth bomb on you of like, no, that was the old way. This is your way now. All right. Yeah. We're going to shout out to Lee in this episode. We are grateful.
Huge shout out to Lee, because she was the reason and then it clicked and I was like, so right then I was like, okay, cool. Well, my YouTube channel is going to be called Divinity School. And so at first my YouTube channel was called Divinity School, and I've since changed the name of my platform to Divinity Ranch, which is a bit more like integrative of me and my personality and my flavor this time around. I mean, I literally did grow up on a ranch in Wyoming. And, but yeah, it was because Lee and that meditative message. And then I just started, I mean, I have kept, because I'm very into showing people the process, like that you have to start somewhere. So I've never deleted any of my videos. So you can go on my YouTube channel, Divinity Ranch, and see the first, video I ever posted. And it's like, I watched it the other day. I was like, I can't even listen to this because it was like, I was so like, hi, I'm Virginia. And like, but I started somewhere and I've come a long way in a year.
And it's kind of the reminder that it is about the becoming, it's not the wait until it's perfect. Then you get to go out and do this thing. Like, you have to become, you have to be expressing. And I haven't watched the first videos, but yeah, I'm sure
don't watch it.
They'll just be like, who was that? I'm just thinking like the depth and focus of the message from the other day, where I'm like, I see you, I feel you. Yeah.
Well, so it was actually, have you ever heard of Elena Sue?
Yep.
Okay. So she's actually how I got connected. And like, one of my really good friends, Mandy, who's a hypnotherapist and does radical acceptance stuff in Seattle, connected me to Elena Sue, who has this platform called Impacting Millions, which I like joined, by the way. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I joined this because of Mandy, but then I quickly was like, I don't know what my mission is. I don't know what my platform is. I have nothing. And serendipitously got connected with Lee. And so it was like, Selena is how I got connected with Lee, but I always remember something that I did learn from Selena, and maybe you remember this quote too. And it's that imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. And that was like always in the back of my head too. It was like, okay, well, I mean, if I'm waiting for my message to be perfect, for my videos to be perfect, for my presentation to be perfect, that's just going to be perfect in action. And I can live in that place forever, or I can just put it out there while it's imperfect. And
gosh, it's so interesting because I did the same actually thing that you did last year. I joined Impacting Millions. I was there for like the first month, and then I was like, oh gosh, yeah, overwhelmed. What is my mission? What is my message? Like, I don't have anything to put out there yet. But I think we kind of both knew deep down, right? Like, that this is where we're headed.
Yeah.
This is the
look at us now
that we desire.
Also, are we the same person? Like, what is happening?
So that's so funny. I'm like, oh yeah, I should go back and look in there, because I'm like, now I'm ready for it.
Me too. Exactly. And dude, I feel you. I know. And you also, like, your website, your podcast. I mean, I really want to have a podcast. Like, so good on you. And your website looks amazing. And you are starting to impact millions.
Yeah, no, it's happening. And I think it's that same thing of being comfortable with imperfect action. You know, I wouldn't say it's something that I grew up believing. I'll tell you this, I think it was sophomore year in high school. I was in the, in forensics, the speech and debate club. And I was original oratory. Like, I was not in the acting parts of it. I was just in the oratory part. And I remember I wrote and gave a speech called Forgetting the F in Failure, which was all about being comfortable with failing and learning and growing. And it was the most inauthentic BS speech I ever gave. Like, I didn't win a single competition with it because obviously I didn't believe what I was saying for a second, you know, like, kidding me? You think I'd be okay with an A minus, let alone an F at that point? No.
I resonate.
So, like, imperfect action was not part of the DNA growing up. It was just action, and the action was perfect, or I didn't do it.
Right. And, I mean, I've learned, it's so interesting you bring that up, because I've learned so much about, and there's so much research coming out about it too. I'm sure that I would guess that you are a fan of Brené Brown.
Yep.
Who has been someone, and she has the sociological research to show us, right, that failure is intrinsic to success. And then you have, Carol Dweck with growth versus mindset, and seeing failure as, a reason to stop and believe you're a failure, or as just seeing it as one of the steps to success. But something that's been really interesting for me, being back in my hometown and around my parents is, and now that I've become more self-aware and more observant, like, just kind of taking notes of like, oh, like, these are the things that I was taught then. And my family is very much into overachieving, very much into, both of my parents are medical doctors. My older brother's an aeronautical engineer. My younger brother is graduating from medical school, and, no pressure, but, I got into an argument with my dad like several months ago, in which we were literally talking about failure, and he was just like, no, like, successful people don't fail. And I was like, well, actually, like, the sociological research shows us. And he was just like, And so that made me realize, like, clearly, even if I want to, even if you want to do that speech in high school, and even if I want to get out here and tell people, like, really deep down, there's still some serious reprogramming that needs to continue taking place.
Well, there's yet another similarity of kind of moving back by like hometown and parents. I came back to Florida February of last year to start this business. And now my parents and one sister and one brother are all 20 minutes away. And of course, with COVID, like, it's just meant a lot of family hangout time. And of course, on the one hand, it's great. On the other hand, I'm seeing how I behave in that environment versus outside of it. Like, the things that I think are acceptable and not acceptable, I can almost play out every single conversation we're going to have as a family because we've had them before. So it's been eye-opening, and really it's been tough, right? Of like moving back. It's like I had gone away to North Carolina and DC and San Francisco for my career to find myself. And I actually feel like I've discovered so much more this past year, but now it's closer to family, and it's kind of bucking up too against everything that I had learned early on. So,
right.
Yeah, we're kind of put in different places to learn different things.
How does your family feel or about your, endeavor of your own business and a much more sort of heart-centered kind of living in all of this?
Well, I'm sure my dad is going to listen to this podcast. He's probably my number one podcast listener. So hi, Dad. And he'll send me messages. I'm
envious of that. That's really cool.
Really appreciate. And And I've tapped my sister to help me on some book launches. And then actually, yeah, my brother Joey is a big fan. And I think my mom, I'm not sure what she thinks about, about the business, but I think overall, I think they were happy to have me back on the East Coast, number one. I feel like they did think I was crazy to leave this super high paying job with tons of benefits and a really amazing career trajectory.
Right.
But I think they're also starting to see that this is the work that I'm meant to do. And I've had moments like this in the past, right, where I switched careers and my parents were like, why would you leave that place? It was so good. And they had no idea there was something way better. And I think it's another evolution of like, no idea that this is way, way better. So I would say just generally supportive, but still don't quite get it. Right. And that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I take that, to be a good thing, as far as that just means that we're actually doing something different. Like if people don't get it. Also though, yeah, again, another similarity. I mean, I've done that same thing a lot of times, and just a big example that really defined the trajectory of my life. I went to my freshman year of college at Northwestern University in Chicago to Medill School of Journalism, which is the best undergraduate school of journalism in the United States, or was at the time. And after my freshman year, I came back to Cody, Wyoming, and, spent the summer outside and with horses and getting into rock climbing. And I was like, I'm not going back to Northwestern. And my parents were like, what are you doing? But they also wanted me to be happy and they supported me. But it's like, who would leave this program and everything that it's going to lead you to? And yet my life would have been so, and I think I would have continued to be more focused on external validation rather than internal motivation.
Yeah, you would definitely be a blue checkmark Twitter, as we call them. You'd have to be as a journalist who, goes to Northwestern for undergrad. So thankfully, like your spirit knew then there's another path for you to create. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about something that struck you, and it struck me in reading your chapter where you wrote, you're like, I'm not sure why, but I felt called to take this online codependency course as one of the things that you did last year. And you're like, this seems familiar. Why? And I just wanted to ask you more about that experience and kind of what you learned from participating.
Totally. And I'm going to send you after this, I'll send you the link to the class just because I would like to, I can't remember the woman's name, and it's on Daily Ohm, and I'd like to support this woman because I actually did end up getting in touch with her. But she's a cognitive behavioral therapist, and it's a phenomenal course on Daily Ohm. So yeah, it's just, you can probably resonate with this maybe, or maybe not, but of this thing where I had this sort of identity of myself, and that I think a lot of people would have sort of labeled me as like, oh, Virginia's so independent. She always, is going on the adventures, and she's this strong, independent woman, and she's always doing her own thing, which was why it was so weird when I was scrolling on Facebook and I saw this ad for a codependency class, and I was like, oh, but something about the descriptor, I was like, whoa, like that strikes a nerve, like in a way that made me click on it. And it was sort of the beginning of that opening of awareness, where I realized that, again, even though I had this sort of sheen of like, I get my self-love from myself, I believe in myself, I'm so independent, that in fact, I really was very codependent on getting my validation from others in my life. And specifically, and then you look at things like, wow, when I look at my parents' relationship, very codependent, and like I've this with them. So I think also that's the narrative of love that we're shown in our society. So it's not like a blame thing. It's like codependency equals love, as far as what most movies and romantic, whatever shows us. And so it just made me realize how much I had organized my life around making myself fit with whoever my partner was at the time. For instance, like after I ended up graduating from college at Montana State University, and, you know, all of this was beautiful. It's all led me to where I am now. But like, instead of going to grad school for political theory, like I thought I was going to at the time, I moved to Austin with my musician boyfriend and sort of like curated my life around him, and then left and did my own thing, but then got back together with him and curated my life around him again. And, you know, I had always wanted to go live in Australia for a year, or to live in Australia in general, but I did it in this way that fit with my Australian boyfriend who I met on the Camino. And so going to Guatemala by myself was really, again, this kind of alone time that I spent there, it was like suddenly I was able to, you know, pick myself up from my own life. And when I looked over the landscape of it, I was like, I have been really codependent. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. What are your, because I saw that your journey has involved some like boundary things and.
Yeah. And it feels like it continues to crop up. And it's interesting when you talk about relationships and like, you know, you're the independent woman, and the second you're in the relationship, you're like, oh, okay, where is he going? Great. I'll go there. Yeah. You know, for me, what I've noticed is like, in my relationships, I've still been the one, right, that the other person, I wouldn't say is conforming to, but it's like I have this stronger vision for like where I want life to go.
Right.
And so if you were to ask my past relationships, they would be like, oh no, this is Kayleigh's world and we're all just living in it. But what they wouldn't really tell you because is like, but I would feel and sense the ways in which I was always thinking about, it's like this conscientiousness to a bad part where I was always thinking about the other person, but more not having boundaries of like, okay, how will they seem to others? What is it that they're doing? Okay, they're not so great at this, so let me drop my energy down. Like I can see all the ways where like, yes, maybe it was Kayleigh's world and I'm the shining star, but I really didn't feel that. Like I felt like I was sort of dropping down in
constantly accommodating.
Yes. Yes.
Did you just say accommodating?
Yep.
Okay, that was weird. Yeah.
And I can totally trace that back to childhood, to family structure, where it's like, you know, you don't get to have emotions. You're accommodating, you know, the forces that be, and like needing to just handle your emotions by not having them. And so this accommodation theme has come up a lot, and it's challenging because I guess really until we're talking about, I haven't really used that word or really had that observation, and then how to actually talk about it. And it's like, is there even a conversation, or I've just made, because of this past, decisions that put me in this place where I feel that I need to accommodate. So,
yeah. Right. I totally relate to that. Well, and so this just ties into sort of a larger theme where I literally would tell people, just quick question, by the way, where are you in the mix with your siblings?
I'm the oldest of four.
I knew it. Yeah. I'm the middle and the only girl. So I literally used to tell people, like, as this point of pride, that my strength, you know, was that I could basically read anyone and then become whatever would make them comfortable. So like accommodation to the max, right? And I know, you know, reading about you, like you also have always been, it sounds like, both hyper observant and hyper competitive, which I can relate to a lot. I think we probably both played sports as well, if I had to guess. And so this was like this superpower that I felt like I had. And I know exactly what you mean, as far as like, okay, so I can tell that, you know, if I'm too strong in this way, that's going to, or reveal too much of myself in this way, that's going to make this person uncomfortable. So I'm going to accommodate. And like, but I thought it was like this great thing that I did to always make sure that everybody around me was comfortable, which, I mean, obviously I've since learned sometimes one of the best gifts we can give people is to be okay with them being uncomfortable. Yeah. You know, if it means us being able to authentically be who we are. But yeah, I mean, that was basically just a big old fat paradigm based on codependency and people pleasing. And basically what I was saying, not like this was it's like, okay, well then my greatest talent in the world is that I've used all of my, inherent, ability to become really good at people pleasing. And that's some great, thing. And it just kept me from knowing, and I'm still figuring it out and will be for the rest of my life. But it's like, well, what do you actually want? Like, who are you? Like, we get it, Virginia, that you can go adapt to and be good at any situation that you get put into. Like, that's awesome. What would happen though, if you were good at a situation that you created for yourself instead of, one where you make sure that whoever it is you've attached yourself to is going to feel comfortable with you?
Yeah. So I wrote down these words, right? It's accommodation, compromise, codependency, and then this shift to, I think it has been challenging to say, what is it that I really desire, or what is the path that I want to be on, like for me and not for others, not for approval, not to be in this circle that I thought was special to be a part of or not. Because I imagine what I have to think more about, but what I just kind of shared about personal relationships, and like, oh, this has to be true in all of my other relationships in business and how I used to work. Right. And if I think about it, it's what actually got me so frustrated in a lot of the different roles that I have. And I will think about it just out loud right now, where there was so much accommodation, but there were sort of dropping down to least common denominator. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing like, I want to work exclusively with leaders, people who are responsible, who are curious, who do understand how to manage their emotions. And I have to continue to grow into that leader that can work with those types of leaders, because I'm like, wait, I've been there and done that, where I've been so frustrated, and I then blamed myself for like, why can't you be more accommodating and understanding of these individuals that you're working with? And it's like, they're just not at your level, but I don't mean like talent level, but there was some other level that I couldn't even really describe, but
like growth mindset, like expansiveness, like the willingness to be self-critical and self-aware. I mean, I think it's more, something along those lines. It's not like it's some inherent thing where you're, on a different level. It's even just that you have the willingness to continue to want to up level. Yeah. And,
So it was not surprising that like working in the like mortgage industry, even though it was for a technology company, which was about change, it wasn't necessarily about growth. And that was a really difficult place for me to be in. And it's like, yay, I did it. But like, thankfully it brought me on this path. So it's all good. But yeah, that was not a great spot. You talk about the difference, you are a writer, you are a speaker, and you talk about the difference between kind of writing with passion or writing excitedly versus writing or expressing and sharing from the heart.
Right.
And I think when people hear that, they're like, oh, passion and heart, these are the same things.
Right.
But you suggest that they're different. And I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just wanting to bring this up. So I'm going to bring it. I don't bring it up in my chapter because I hadn't read the book at the time. But a book that I read this year that has been really monumental for me that I would suggest to anyone. It's called Women and Desire Beyond Wanting to Be Wanted. And it's by an author, a doctor named Polly Young Eisendrath. And she's a Jungian psychoanalyst and therapist. I'm very into Carl Jung. And so, but it's actually a perfect paradigm that she presents in that exemplifies this. So she talks about how, especially as women, and I just think in general, especially in American culture, we're really taught that what desire is or what passion is all about being the subject of the desire of others. So like, what signifies desire is basically like, how can I be desirable to other people? So, and in my writing, it's like getting excited about like, how can I write something that I know other people are going to like? Like, oh, I know that this is good.
And this is clever, or this is insightful, or
Right.
like, ooh, yeah, yep.
Yeah. Or like, ooh, this is really like, that kind of thing. And so we're very much trained, again, especially as women, that when it comes to desire, the most important thing is to learn how to get good at being the subject of desire, the subject of the desire of others. Mm-hmm. And literally, this gets into our subconscious and into our body, even in the way of like, the only way that we feel legitimate with like being turned on or experiencing pleasure, like we associate that with like, oh, well, like the only thing that turns me on is other people being turned on by me. Like that's what I need to be turned on. Right. And so the opposite of that, what is to be the object of your own heart's desire. And so, I'm sorry. I think I mixed that up. So it's to be the subject of your own heart's desire. And what we're normally trained to do is to be the object of desire for others. So to become this, so the takeaway is to become the subject of our own heart's desire. And that's the difference between, in this lens, like writing something that I think other people are going to write, or that I think other people are going to like, versus digging deep down and seeing like, what is it that my heart actually has to say? Because this kind of goes back to the thing of like, great, I can be good at anything. I can fit in anywhere. Like I can write well about any subject, and I can get passionate and excited about it and figure out how to write it in a way that's going to be really like, and do well, versus what is it that my heart actually desires to write about, and asking yourself, instead of the question of how can I be desirable to others, what do I desire? Like, and I know that sounds really simple. But as I continue going deeper and deeper into being the subject of my own heart's desire, I'm kind of like blown away, like discovering like what I actually desire. And, for instance, in this larger way, it's like, well, my heart actually really desired to talk about spiritual things. And that had never been something that I could really believe would be desirable to others, especially to, the naysayers that I would make up in my head. And so, yeah, there's just and it's a lot scarier. It's a totally different kind of passion, right? Like I still feel this passion, but it's a lot scarier when I'm writing from this place of like, this is what I really want to say, and I have no idea if people are going to like this or not. So,
it kind of really, it connects to something that I've started doing differently lately, where I almost just stopped writing my newsletter because I couldn't figure out, what do people want to hear from me? And I was like, I don't know what they want to hear. And whatever they want to hear, I don't know if I want to write about it. So I just stopped writing. And then I think it was 3 weeks ago where, for whatever reason, I was like, you know what? On Mondays, I want to write about whatever happened over the weekend and some awareness around it. On Wednesdays, I'm going to share wisdom and talk about just a virtue card and how it plays out. And on Fridays, I'm going to share celebrations within the business because it's end of the week and that's exciting to me. And of course, it's been amazing just doing this for 3 weeks, where a bunch of people have unsubscribed, which is fine. I decided to actually go out to the broadest audience that I haven't even really connected with. But I'm like, let me just start to see who this, connects with. And then it's been fascinating where like these emails have generated way more feedback than anything else I had been writing before I decided to stop. Like people taking the time to send me a reply. And so it's like, it's even by just focusing on like, what is it that I want to share regardless?
Yes.
You feel that. And those that it connects with, they're the ones that they hit reply. And then it's this virtuous cycle where you're like, oh, wow, okay, I did have this impact. And now we're having a conversation about something that matters. So I definitely can just even observe this shift lately. And then to your point around what do we actually desire, this has been super, super challenging as like starting the business, building the business, because I can shift so much. Like one day I'm like, yes, this is gonna be like CEO of this multi-million-dollar company, and we're gonna publish all these books and like amplify everyone's wisdom, and it's gonna be great. And then this shift into like, I kind of just want to study and share the things that I'm learning and be more of this teacher. And like, and there's this like little war that's still happening, and I'm like, there's something deeper of like, what are the desires beneath that, right? Financial abundance and having a platform. Like there's something else there, but it's like, no, this is what I want. And it's like, okay, want is different than a desire. And how do I go deeper and then allow whatever the answer is to be okay? Because there's a lot of judgment too, where I'm like, okay, but why don't I want this thing that I put a lot of value on for a really long time?
Right. Well, and it's like, I also just feel like it's like the pendulum swinging, and you're going to come to that middle. And another way to say that is integration, because and I relate to that a lot, with this idea of sort of integrating these two sides of yourself. And that finally has started. And I feel that happening for you. Mm-hmm. And I feel finally that is starting to happen for me too, because, when I started Divinity School, now Divinity Ranch, is like the pendulum swung like totally spiritual and creative, whereas before it had been like totally like hardcore academia journalist or like outdoor adventurer, like and now I've changed the mission of Divinity Ranch to be documenting real life magic. Ooh. And I'm starting to try to integrate that journalistic side with the spiritual magical side, because it's like, okay, well, do I want to be like a spiritual teacher or like a hardcore journalist? Somewhere in between. Like, I don't. So.
Oh, all right. Well, that's actually makes me feel better to plot this past year too on this pendulum swing, where like probably February to September was like all just like, let me write and share things, and I just use my savings. I don't know how I'm going to make money. And then it was like, oh, that time's up. Like, now I will be CEO, make money. Great. You can do that too. And now it's like, okay.
Exactly.
We're getting somewhere.
I have goosebumps from that. So you're on the right track. So
tell us more in the remaining time. I'd love to know more about Divinity Ranch. And so we've got a little bit of the vision right here. And I think my final question too is, what's one thing, I read your journey about connecting into your heart. Like, what is something that people like me who it's like, we sense there's so much power there, and we also can feel the wall of China that's around it right now. Yeah. Something that we can do to start to chip away and let her feel safe to be seen.
Well, I'm just going to share what immediately comes to me for that, because this is something that has been a really powerful practice for me lately. So another book that I would highly recommend, and that's a big part of my YouTube channel and blog, you'll find.
I love it.
I've been, so it's called Meditations on the Tarot, A Journey into Christian Hermeticism, which I love that, right? Because we'd be like, tarot and Christianity. Yeah. How do those go together? And then all about the integration. And so and it's by an anonymous author who I think was a monk, which is really cool. And it was published in 1980. So it's a very powerful practice that I've been activating a lot lately, and has literally every single time I do this, I like notice something magical that like changes the whole course of my day, if not my life. So he talks about that the first meditation he starts on number 1, which is the magician. He doesn't start on the fool. He starts on the magician. And he talks about how this archetype of the magician, the secret to accessing that power of the magician is in effortless concentration, also known as play. Mm-hmm. And so, he gives the example of a trapeze artist, and he's like, okay, how do you think a tightrope walker, how do you think a tightrope rope walker gets across the tightrope? Like, do you think it's by them thinking about and agonizing over every step, you know, no, they would fall off immediately. They basically go into a trance. What is that trance? So the way that he describes it is it's the difference between intellectual, imaginative brain and rhythmic brain. Right? So to me, it's the difference between the mind and the heart. And so just even having that activation of like, this isn't something that I need to think about right now. Like I can relax and go into this rhythm. And sometimes it's like me just like feeling my heartbeat and closing my eyes and going into that, or even tapping a rhythm or doing breathing, right? Anything that is circulatory or rhythmic. And seriously, every single time, okay, this is just an example. This is a very intense thing that recently happened to me. So the owl is an extremely powerful animal and spirit guide to me. Like it's hard to explain how much owl medicine and magic and symbolism means in my life. And last week before the full moon in Libra, which is my rising sign, I was driving down the road and, you know, I was doing the thing where, again, this is how we like exhaust ourselves all the time, because we always have that intellectual, imaginative brain on that goes in these like, you know, we don't need to have it. Like if you put it on when you know, are actually needing to concentrate or in a time when you can rest, like you're really just fucking with yourself, like in a way that you don't need to. So I was driving and I was in that kind of place and I was like, no, like this is a perfect time to rest and come to rhythmic brain. And so I just like connected with my breath, put one hand over my heart, and literally I felt myself drop into it, like drop into presence. And in that exact moment that I dropped into it, I like see something out of the side of my eye. And I'm like, that's a familiar shape. And I park my van and I go and walk over. And sure enough, it was the body of an owl that had just recently, like within the last 12 hours, been hit by a car, perfectly intact. And, you know, this was just one of the most magical, sacred things that had ever happened in my life. I never would have noticed that though, if I had been in this place, but because I came to the rhythm, to the heart, and I ended up, calling a dear friend who is, you know, connected to the Native American community here. And I ended up taking the owl and saving the owl in my freezer for a few days and doing a really sacred full moon ceremony, like on top of this mountain behind my house with this owl that I know was just like a magical, you know, symbol and sacrifice that asked to come and be appreciated in my life. And like, I was there for it because I was in this place instead of this one. So that's just what, I mean, that's the, you know, just even having that idea of remembering that you can come to rhythm, whether it's, you know, through your breath or, you know, this is why shamanic drumming puts people in trances. So yeah, that has been probably the most powerful practice I've been doing lately. And
as you said, it's what allows you to be there and to show up, like, because often, yes, we are physically there, but we're not really there, and we're certainly not open to the little moments of magic that could happen when we're here.
I think that are actually always like, you know, just test it in your own life. That's what I love to tell people too on my YouTube channel. And that's what I think any, you know, one who's kind of in it says. It's like, test it in your own life. Because for me, literally every single time I've done that, something is there again that is like, whoa, how did I not notice that? And it's like, what are we missing? Like there are times need to use our intellectual the computer that is our brain, but honestly, like most of the time we can be in more of a rhythmic state that you know, I think just like connects us to the whatever pulse or rhythm or heartbeat is behind this whole universe life experience thing. So
you mentioned a van, and I know that There's something special you have planned coming up with a van.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I just bought a van and I'm about to publish a blog that I've been working on, about how I got my van. So that will be on my website soon. It's a 1994 Chevy Astro van that's been converted into this, series of little camper van called a Tiger Pro van. I just bought her a few weeks ago and her name is, Tortuga. Sorry, Tortigra, because it's Tortuga, which is turtle, and then tigre, which is tiger in Spanish. So Tortigra, because she's a Tiger Pro van, but it feels like driving a turtle. I have my home on my back. And so I'm about to go out on the road for Divinity Ranch, like documenting real life magic, from this van, with my two dogs, Peter and Rosalind, and my cat Lady, and just living ever more as myself. Like, people are like, what, are you going to do that for the rest of your life? When are you going to settle down? When are you going to finally? And I'm like, what if this just is me? Like, what if this just is how I want to live, just traveling and documenting and connecting with community all over the world. So I hope that you will come along.
Well, I hope that you make your way down here. Florida will be quite the long haul, but
that would be
I won't ask you what your first
winter.
Yeah, no. So this February of next year would be like, actually November to February was just so perfect here. So yeah, that will be a good time. Otherwise, like, as we've gotten to this point right now, it's just, it's hot. It's miserable.
It's just starting to warm up here in Wyoming.
Oh gosh. So I don't want to be one of those people that's like, where's your first stop? So, but like, which direction will you set out? Like north, south, east, or west? I'll ask you that.
Right. So my first leg of my trip, I'm seeking to set out, around April 16th, around there. And I'm just going to go south. Okay. My older brother and lots of really close friends are in the Denver area. So I'll stop by there first. And then the first leg of my trip going to be about a month and a half, because I'm going to come back up to Wyoming at the end of May. It's my younger brother's graduation from medical school party. So that's I like that has created this like month and a half sort of test drive. So I really, I think a lot of people will either think I'm crazy or relate to this. My experience traveling has been that the best things happen when you don't have fixed plans. And so my idea for this first month and a half is just to go south. So whether I end up making it to West Texas, just out in the open nothingness of the plains there, which is really calling to me, or I just spend all of it, in Southern Colorado, or who knows. I'm just going south, and I really, in a lot of this, again, is to create a scenario that will give me that same kind of spaciousness that I felt like I had in Guatemala. Honestly, that led to this podcast, because I never would have met you if I hadn't gone on that journey of self-discovery. So
yeah, it's putting ourselves out there, creating space for people to enter our lives that we hadn't even planned for, that I do feel, and maybe you can relate, like for me, spending time living with family in Bolivia or Argentina or Nicaragua or Spain, wherever it was, like having to communicate in a language where I couldn't use my head as much, I didn't know all the words, like that's where you really, those are the moments where I could feel my heart the most, and just felt a connection with people that made me very aware of the airs that I put on, or the person that I try to be back in my home country and home culture. And so for you to go out and create that magic, and I think bring that spirit on your journey as you're meeting with people is just going to be so powerful. And we're all going to be following along on your YouTube channel, Divinity Ranch. And I'm just so grateful that our paths have crossed. And I have a feeling this is going to be the first of many conversations.
I hope so. I feel like I could talk to you for
I feel like there's a lot of opportunities too for us to co-create some pretty pretty amazing things together. It's like we certainly have similarities and then very different, I think, strengths and perspectives too. So it's just been an honor having you on. And I want to thank you for sharing your experience with us and for the work that you're doing to lead the way and model what does it mean to live an authentic life. So thank you.
Well, igualmente, querida, because you're doing the same thing. And I'm very inspired, and this is an honor to be here. And these kinds of connections I find are what ends up lighting the way forward. So I'm so thankful to be able to connect with your audience too. Love you guys.
They're going to love you. Oh, could you not just feel Virginia's energy in that conversation? Honestly, we could have talked for hours and hours. It was really hard to condense everything I wanted to talk about into such a short amount of time. So I hope to bring Virginia back on the podcast soon. And as a reminder for those of you listening, Soul Excellence Publishing, my company to help conscious leaders express themselves, has just put out a new book called Significant Women: Leaders Reveal What Matters Most, featuring the stories of 22 executives and entrepreneurs from around the globe, sharing their personal stories of how they define success, what mattered to them, how they shaped their careers. There's so many lessons in there for men and women alike. So go to KayleighO'Keefe.com to check out that. And if you're feeling inspired to write your own thought leadership book, your own story of personal transformation, also just book a call with me to learn more about how we support individual authors to get your story out in really just under 5 months. This does not have to take your life to get your story out there, because it's truly in getting the story out there where you're able to have that dialogue and to grow and write your next book. All right, that was super, super fun. I am totally taking away this concept of the pendulum. I'll be swinging back and forth until we hit that sweet spot. And thank you for being with me on the journey as I do so. All right, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. See you on the next one.